Hey guys, welcome back to Final Sector, a video that I'm hosting for once. I'm picking up the slack and taking over this show. And the content of today's video is about our F1 2024 driver predictions.
Hell yeah.
This is I don't know if I'd say it's an interesting one. We had so much change last year. We predicted a lot of change last year, and yet there was so much more change than we could have predicted, than anyone could have predicted, I think. And prefacing it a bit, the general trend is after a huge amount of change, there might be less change for at least a year.
Could be a real boring video depending on how you look at this. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it might be quick, so it won't take up too much of your time. I did do a bit of snooping around just to see if anyone else is really talking, and I still saw very, very little, and we're in mid-February, which is normally when most of these videos have come out from others that are on top of their game.
Yeah.
So I haven't looked at anything per se. I've kind of used my own thoughts here. But yeah, it's we'll see if we get into some discussion points. I've got a few, but certainly shorter, maybe a bit shorter than last year.
No, I got a couple. Like I've got a few drivers for most teams that I'm like, oh, they could be in the picture. But yeah, I think the general consensus is there's probably going to be quite a bit less change this year. So, but you never know. Like we said, last year was unpredictable, so we never really know. But yeah,
and there were certain things last year that we thought were certains that we're like, oh, don't worry about this. There's lots else to look at, and then that turned out to be a pivotal point in the market. So. Yeah, but anyway, so I've just randomized the team order here. I haven't gone based on championship order or anything. I figured let's just do it random.
Sick.
So the first team that has come up is Alfa Romeo.
Here we go. Yep. Okay.
Maybe a team that has a little bit of talking point. Of course, a team that is merging into Audi in the future. Of course, that is in the future. So although there's been a few personnel changes and such, there's still a while to go there. So it could still be a time where we may see some movements in 2024 to prepare for that. But what do you think of our drivers for 2024 here?
Yeah, so for me, there was really only, right now, I think there's only 3 drivers in the picture for the 2 spots. And it's, I think, the same 3 drivers I had last year as well. For
yes, it
for
hasn't
this year's
really
prediction.
changed.
Hasn't changed. I think if Audi are looking for someone, I think 2024 is probably a year too early. If they're preparing for 2026 and they want a driver for it, 2025 is probably the year they'd be looking at if they're going to go that way. But yeah, we'll see what eventuates that. It's still very early days. I don't know how much control they're going to have over, the driver market and all that as well. So that's hard to say. But yeah, I've already said it. 3 drivers. So it's Bottas, Guan Yu Zhou, Zhou Guan Yu, and Théo Pourchaire. They're the 3 in the picture. I didn't really see anyone else come up. I think it'd be silly that anyone else would come up. It's whether or not I think that Pourchaire will get the seat over one of the other 2, and I don't think he will. I think, the big question is whether Zhou will do enough to warrant keeping his seat, and I think he's shown enough in the first year that he will do more than enough this year to hold that seat as well. I think Bottas, he has a good relationship with Bottas as well, from what I've seen. And yeah, I think those 2 could be a good partnership for at least a couple of years going forward, assuming they're both performing. So yeah, don't really see any changes there, unfortunately. I don't know what's going to happen with Pourchaire. I really hope it's not going to be like another even De Vries situation where he's we win the championship. Say is he in F2 this year? I think he's still in F2. Yeah.
And he was runner-up last year. So.
Yeah, so like it'd be a shame if he does miss out on an F1 seat just due to the fact that it's hard to kick out a driver that's doing well to throw him in. But yeah, I can't see them putting him in just yet. So I don't know. It's a tough one though. How about yourself?
No, yeah. So similarly, I mean, Bottas, I think, is secure for now. When you think of him in the Audi picture, I think that's a whole other story, but still far too early to talk about that. We'll revisit in 11 to 12 months, I think.
Yes.
In our other video for our season predictions, I did back Xiao Guanyu quite heavily, so it will be a little odd of me to say, but even though I think he's going to improve, he's out. Again, whether he's the future of Audi or not, different conversation, but I think for now, both drivers are secure. I mean, Porsche is interesting because he was hyped up so much. I feel like last year in the grand scheme of things, a relatively weaker F2 season, he still did fine, but... if he wanted to kind of get in here over one of the other two drivers for next year, you feel like he already should have won the championship and by a bit last year to then kind of have a year in reserve to then get in there. I think then he'd be in the picture. I think even now, if he wins and does well, it is a little hard to see how the cards play out for him.
Yeah.
Whether that's a future thing, because really then you're saying, well, do Audi want him? That's a trickier question, but I think you feel like Audi's quite a big juggernaut, and he'd really have to start this year by going, hey, I see that Audi's coming in. How are you going? Here's what I can do. Watch this. And then he has to go out and do it. But you just say he should have done that already on the trajectory he was on previously. So
what
any other thought? Go on.
I was going to say what I would think, speaking about that, you mentioned about, Audi possibly not wanting him. Would it be really, really smart for him now, if he knows he's probably not going to get a seat for the next couple of years, is to maybe venture out into other branches of motorsport, specifically seeking out Audi, like to a race with Audi, maybe to sort of show Audi in particular what he can do in one of their cars, so that way when an opportunity potentially does come up for 2025, 26, when Audi decide to come in, he's got this like, oh yeah, I've already raced for you in this category and I've done really well. So that I think that would be a smart thing for him to at least consider. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was like,
you're okay. It was good to finish that thought, because I was going to jump elsewhere. And on that point as well, we're almost in an era where sports car racing is really starting to reboom. So in that case, it could be a case where he's saying, look, even if this isn't a direct path for me, maybe because he's already got that relationship building behind the scenes in his own career anyway, he could build something with Audi and go there for the future for whatever they're thinking. And similar to what De Vries did, where he still stayed in the Mercedes fold and he didn't really do sports car per se, but he still went off to represent the brand in other areas, and that's shown to be enough for him to be, slide in here. So, yeah, but again, I think he's going to have to go around the bush a bit to get there. The only other thought I was going to mention, and I guess this pertains to one other team on the grid as well, is Ferrari Juniors, because Ferrari, of course, I mean, I've got them second on the list, so we can start to lead this into there if you like.
Sure.
So they've got two juniors in F2 in Arthur Leclerc and Oliver Behrman. Both, I think, coming fresh from F3 from relatively good performances. You do look at Ferrari, and I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to say that they look pretty solid, and unless, as you can say for any team, someone entirely drops the ball, they look pretty solid going into 2024, both Sainz and Leclerc. But there's this story which we might have with a few other teams in that one of those drivers is still at some point going to drop off, and yet who do they have in the ranks to replace them immediately? So for both teams like Alfa and Ferrari, and potentially even Haas, there are drivers like Leclerc and Behrman, which you would consider to say, well, maybe there's still that, the customer base, considering they're using Ferrari engines in the case of Haas and Alfa, where maybe they would look at someone like that if they were to shine this year, particularly if one of them comes in and smashes Porsche. Alfa Romeo may go, well, actually, maybe we'll take one of these guys for the future and with Audi. So I imagine Audi are keeping close eyes on them as well, and there's probably some communication with Ferrari there as well if they might trade some hands in the short term. So I know.
Well, I know there is a lot of hype around Ollie Behrman as well in recent years. So
well, I think he's looking at the chart I've got in front of me anyway, I think he's the only driver where in these last 3 series he's earned silverware, as in for his championship finishing position in the last 3 series.
Yeah, wow.
The closest to that, I think, is Victor Martins, who's had 2 firsts, but then had a 5th. So
yeah, he's also
in that regard,
highly rated driver, Victor Martins.
Yes. So so that I guess summarizing Alfa and Ferrari together. I don't think either will change, but I think there's an interesting story with some of these juniors coming up, and I think as a lot have said, which is another trend here, this year of F2, I think will be quite interesting to see who the next generation of future drivers are. We've kind of had the current generation come in now, and everyone's been saying it's really exciting. We're seeing a lot of the previous talents now come to the front to see how they're going, which is exciting. But who's the next kind of tier coming through? This feels like a year to say who's going to prove themselves to step up to the spotlight.
Yeah, definitely. I guess on Ferrari, to keep it short, I've also got Leclerc and Sainz.
You're going to prove me wrong, Rico. They're both leaving.
Behrman and Arthur Leclerc will be in that Ferrari seat.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I do think they've... I mean, I can't see Charles leaving ever right now. Like, there's not even an iota
especially because
in my
they
mind.
seem to have, like, management has even changed in his favor. So you'd be surprised if
with Fred Vasseur.
Trending, they're saying we want to make you happy. He's your best mate here to lead you into the future together.
Very true. And then Carlos is there's maybe a little bit more of a question mark on Carlos, but I think they're still going to back him. They know what he's capable of, even if he was a little mistake prone last year. They know what he is capable of, and I think they'll back him while they don't really have a definite, like, you know, someone knocking at the door currently. So I think they'll still back him. I don't think they'll trade off for another driver on the grid. I think that they will wait for a junior or someone else to come through if they are considering dropping Sainz in the future. But that's not going to happen for next year, I don't think. So same lineup at Ferrari as well. So
well, good. We move into one that could be one of the highest talking points. In fact, if it's not, I'd be surprised. It's probably the only team I've got several lines of notes for, which is AlphaTauri. They ironically just had their car reveal for 2023 this morning, a few hours ago. So I think that looks pretty spicy, just commenting on that. But of course, the car that looks good has to be quick, and there's a few question marks around them, I think, both in terms of performance and their drivers. So I have some thoughts, but I'll let you go forward first, considering I've kind of led the other few points so far.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, like you said, they've got a lot to do. If you watch the season predictions, I've predicted them to at least make some improvement. I think a lot of that's going to owe to Nick De Vries in the car. And as such, I've got him retaining his seat for 2024. I think unless he does an absolutely awful dog shit job, it seems unlikely they'll drop him after 1 year. I think he'll prove more than his worth. The bigger question is that second seat in Yuki Tsunoda. This is his... How many years has he had now? Is this his third or fourth year?
I think this will be his third.
Third year in F1. He had a decent-ish first year, if mistake prone and a bit fucking, his head was sort of all over the place. And then his second year, you sort of expected him to come out and, sort of calm down a bit and be a bit more consistent and sort of become, the Formula One driver that you need to be to stay in the sport. And he didn't really do that.
No.
I was a little bit surprised. I think we might have even talked about this in I haven't released that video. I haven't edited that video. You might not have seen it. If it ever gets released, you'll see it. But where we reacted to our predictions, the 2023 driver predictions, where we were both surprised that Tsunoda even got the nod over someone else for this year. So in that vein, I have actually got Tsunoda leaving, and I've got a new driver coming in. The question is, who do they bring in? And I've got, because you talk about, you've got the obvious one's the Liam Lawson. He's obviously been the next tip driver to come in. You've got the Iwasa, who I think did a lot better than both of us expected. You've got there was I think Zane Maloney as well is coming into F2. He's part of the Red Bull program. There's a little bit of talk around him as well. So I have got Liam Lawson in that second seat, though. I think he's...
Oh, okay.
I think he's... I think they're trying to do with Lawson what they wanted to do with Yuri Vips before he did things that ruined his chances for that. I believe Liam Lawson is going to... Is he going to Super Formula as well, I think?
Yes, he is. He's following that
doing,
similar route.
Doing the similar
is
route.
Almost like the pre-Alpha Tauri training grounds that we've seen in the past.
Exactly. So I can just sort of see it trending towards... If Tsunoda has another not so great season, particularly if I'm predicting De Vries to beat Tsunoda, and I for some reason I don't think it'll be close. And if that happens, I think you can't really keep Tsunoda in that seat, and I think Liam Lawson is primed to get that seat. So yeah, I've got De Vries and Lawson for AlphaTauri. So, but curious to see who you have.
Yeah, so, I mean, we both touted De Vries pretty high. The general sentiment is still up in the air, which I totally understand, but it surprised me that there wasn't more people on his case, but it is what it is. I don't know. I can't think of the specific reason that we like him more.
I don't know.
But we do, so there you go.
Maybe because we've already seen him in a race and he did well once, so that's all we can think about. It's just this bias.
And maybe there's a case with there's someone you've been following for a while, even externally, you kind of get more hype for them. But I don't know. But still, main point is that De Vries, I agree. I think we both said it would be surprising if this was a 1-year deal. I don't feel they're signing him as a stopgap to try and get someone else in. That's not the vibe I get. They're signing him to say, look, here's your proper chance. This isn't just a 1-year get out. This is a... Do you want to prove that you're just as good as any other junior would throw in here and state your case? And to that point, as we said again in our predictions, a good benchmark for Yuki. And it feels like if he doesn't almost beat him quite convincingly, then it's 100% curtains. And there's not enough faith in there. There is still a question mark because the car was so weak last year and because Gasly wasn't so on top of it when he has been. So it's hard to say to go, well, technically he wasn't that off Gasly, so then he's not that bad. But then you go, well, but then was Gasly just a piece of crap? So no, I mean, I went through the same drivers that you did. I guess just super quick thoughts. I mean, Dennis Hauger, we kind of had initially hyped up, but he kind of just dropped the ball last year from his momentum, which then kind of, fizzled a bit. Enzo Fittipaldi, which is a strange signing. He could pop off with potential, but he's not got my money, I'll admit.
No.
There's Jack Crawford and Isaac Hadjar. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Who are both coming through. Yeah, who are both coming through into the same team with High Tech this year.
Actually, I think
both relative unknown quantities.
I think Isaac Hadjar is another one of those, like he's like the Ollie Behrman kind of thing, where they're talking about him very, very highly.
Yes.
So,
yeah. So interesting to see how they go. Iwasa, as we said, most people laughed it was a bit of a joke, but then he was the best performing Red Bull rookie. So I think a lot of people have gone, sorry, mate, there's potentially something here. He is Japanese, and in a respect, even though we know with the Ford deal coming in, Honda's not going to be there forever, but there's potential for them to bring him in as a stopgap and, continue that nice ending to that Red Bull-Honda relationship. Which is ironic because 1 or 2 years ago they said that was ending, but now we're talking as if it never left, which it never did leave. So that's a whole other saga.
Yeah.
And as you say, Zane Maloney, who I didn't really look at, but he did perform quite well in F3 in previous series. He's a little unknown for me. And then Liam Lawson, who seems to be following that route. So to summarize it all, I kind of had down 2 names, which was Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar were my 2 names. I part of my influence is going to be based on what you said. And I think because you've gone down Lawson, then I'll go down the different path, and I will go down the path to say Mr. Isaac, I think, as a shoo-in to do it. I think there are a lot of juniors, but as you rightly said, you'd heard some people were touting him, and that's the same impression I've gotten recently. Which I don't think we've ever spoken about this driver between each other. So this is it's not like it's not like we're going. We've talked about this before. It's our own independent research that's come to the same conclusion. So look, I mean, there's a lot of juniors there, but if I just have to throw my dart at someone, then I reckon he'll get there. Liam Lawson's been the face of Red Bull. I mean, he's been doing a lot of PR work in that, which is the same as their previous drivers that came through. In terms of Gasly and others did as well. But I feel like Red Bull now are almost going back to the period where they have so much choice that they can just pick who's doing the best. And if you're not doing the best, then they'll cycle you. It's not like they kind of need to babysit and let people develop a bit in the wings as such. So I feel like Lawson, like if he smashes out Super Formula, sure, but I think that's really bloody hard because the Super Formula field is insanely competitive. So even if he does all right there, will it be as good as an F2 junior that shines, especially in a field that we're thinking may be really important for F2? So yeah, long story roundabout way, I think I'm going to throw my dart at an unknown quantity. And partly just to keep it interesting, I think if I pick the same answer, it'll be a little bit boring. So it's more fun to...
It's very easy for us to pick the same ones, I think, this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you've got De Vries and Hadjar. Hadjar, that's such an interesting call. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
It's going to be an interesting F2 season.
I think F2 is going to be another one to watch. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we'll move on anyway. That was probably the most interesting talking point in my books. So be prepared to have the sign off in 2 or so minutes.
Yeah, we'll just speed go through the rest.
Yes. Next team we've got is Mercedes. I think echoing comments we had last year, saying is this the year that Hamilton retires? I think if last year wasn't the year, this year's not going to be the year. Year after, you've got a talking point. Again, we're not there yet. We're looking about 2024, start of 2024, not end of 2024.
Yep.
So in my books, Lewis and Russell, I don't see any reason why any of them are headed anywhere at this stage. So I've got them down. What are your thoughts? Prove me wrong. Tell me someone else.
I can't prove you wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being so boring. No, it's Hamilton and Russell as well. Same thoughts as you. I think Hamilton has... I think I said this as well. I think if in a previous video, or maybe even just offline to you, I think if the Mercedes didn't improve as much as it did at the end of last year, and Hamilton sort of was still feeling down about the car and about their chances of ever getting that car to back up to the front. I think there is a very good, chance that he could have left for the end of this year and not come back for 2024. But I think from everything I've read and everything I've heard, it seems like he has a renewed vigor to fight his way back to the front. And with the way that car's trending, there's a very good chance he could be back at the front. He's still racing as well as ever, as he's shown. And yeah, I don't see him leaving for 2024. Like you said, for 25 and the new regulations, I'm not sure he will hang around that long, but that's a long way away. And
indeed,
and they're not going to get rid of Russell, and Russell's not going to want to leave either. So he spent 3 years at Williams to be in this team, and he's not going to leave anytime soon unless he. And
it's not like he's doing crap either. He's already proved himself.
That's it. Yeah. I guess the only other two people I had in here is I'll give a brief mention. Is you've got Mick Schumacher obviously in there as a reserve driver. I don't really know what they're going to do with him. I don't know if the plan is to have him maybe come in if Hamilton decides to leave. Maybe they throw him in. I don't know what the plan is for
That's
Mick.
The thing, right? The other part of it is even if one of the drivers was slipping, who have they got in the background?
They've got him and they've got Frederick. They've got Frederick Vesti and Mick Schumacher.
They've got him and they've got Vesti.
Yep.
And if Vesti won his first year in F2, there's a case to say, hey, maybe he's knocking there. He's ready. Yeah. He came ninth, so I don't think there's much happening there. He's in there again, but that unless he smashed it out, there's no reason you pick him over a Mick right now, and you're not picking a Mick right now. So
not over when you got the two drivers of Hamilton and Russell quality,
and you could argue there's an argument to say that the top 2, top 3 drivers, if you put those two and Max in. Few people could say, yeah, okay, you could see how they're the top 3 in the world right now. So
yeah, you can make a strong argument. Definitely, they're at least I think two in the top 5 with Verstappen, Leclerc, probably Norris. Those 5, they're somewhere in the top 5. So they would have to drop. One of them would have to drop off considerably. For either of those drivers to even be
something out of the ball, right? That could happen to anyone on the grid, which you just can't predict has to happen. So shock retirement or something like that, which you just rolling dice at that point.
That's it. Yeah, but Russell Hamilton, they're the two I've got for 24 as well.
Yeah. Next one, which I think is more interesting in future years, but not right now. You could make an argument, I guess I'd be curious, is McLaren, of course, with their long-standing Lando Norris, who I think is an interesting case for the future, because I think him associating with Audi is very interesting, and a case where you could say if McLaren is eternally stuck in 4th and 5th, whether he thinks going to something like Audi for a long term is a deal. It's way too early to make that call anyway, so I'm not predicting him to jump to Alpha and next year or anything like that.
That would be crazy, though.
Yes, it would. But again, I think in a few years that could be interesting. The other case, of course, is Piastri, which is the known unknown quantity coming in. We're maybe not tooting his horn as hard as others are. Of course, he is completely unknown in that we haven't seen him on the track. So you could guess to say, oh, what if he doesn't perform? Then this will happen and that will happen. But really, if he doesn't do an awful job, and I mean, McLaren have seen to kind of give drivers 2 years anyway, as long as they're doing okay, aka Ricardo, aka Van Dorn, in the past as well. They've kind of gone, he's a bit of time. Even arguably, you could say, was it when Sainz was there, who potentially wasn't as strong? They still, of course, in relative terms now, seeing Ricardo in that come into the fold after it made him look like he got in that car. But still an argument to say they're not just like perform while you're out. It would be strange to see Piastri unless there's some, again, really outside chance of something happening for him to get the boot. And again, even looking, I don't really know who they'd pull in. They'd maybe pull in like someone like a Vesti to say, look, let's just make a deal and get him in there because Piastri's doing so poor. So I've got the same drivers anyway, long story short. What about you?
Yeah, so the only other point I'll mention is the other, I guess, trio of drivers that I've got as a potential to come in are your Colton Herta, Alex Palau, and fucking Pato O'Ward, your Indy drivers. Yep. Which I don't hold much weight to, but they are still sort of in and around the conversation.
They're there, and
constantly.
They were talked about recently, yes.
I just don't... I don't really see them coming in as much as Zach Brown says they could. That he's keeping them in the picture, and they're giving them these drives every so often, or giving them a practice session, and saying, oh, you never know, you could be where you could be in that F1. I just don't see it happening at all. And I can't really see anyone else fighting for that seat. I think Norris will be there as long as he wants to. The only other thing I have seen, like you said. It's interesting that you mentioned the Audi thing, because I've seen him getting maybe a little more frustrated with the team not being, not sort of making their potential.
As good as that team is, he's probably the most strong case you can make for a driver that's over. What do you call it? What is the word? Over showing what the car can do. Like flattering it, flattering the team a little more. When it's someone else's hands, it wouldn't be as strong. So
True.
He's probably one of the only drivers who'd really account that to. Even as poor as a Mercedes was last year, I think you weren't necessarily the drivers were the reason that they did as well as they did.
Yeah, they didn't outshine the car.
Yes, there you go. So, as you say, I think that's where it gets a little more interesting. I think even touching back on Mercedes, there's an argument to say if this goes poor and someone from Mercedes drops off, does he jump ship there? But there's so many variables that start to add up there. It's like, yes, there's potential there, but you got to pick the most likely option at this stage.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I've got Norris there for the time being, and Piastri's not going to be a 1 year. Not with the fucking hassle that they went through to get him. He's not going to be a 1 year.
That's a big thing as well. Yes.
So they're going to hold on to him for at least 2 years, regardless of how poorly he does in that first year. Because I think if they got rid of him after 1 year, they're just showing they made all this hoopla for nothing. A real embarrassing moment for McLaren if that happened.
Yes.
So it's not going to happen. He's going to be there for at least 2 years, possibly longer. But we'll see. So, no change there either. That's a big trend happening of no changes.
Yes, but still some talking points, which is good.
Yeah.
So next on the list, I have Aston Martin. I will let you take the lead on this first. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this. I guess worth bringing up.
Okay. Yeah, I still didn't think too hard on this one, but I guess there is an interesting argument now with Drogovic coming in as, the F2 winner, the quite dominant F2 winner, and he's now part of that Aston Martin development program, their reserve test driver for 2023. And then you've also got the variable of Fernando Alonso, who he just does what he wants. He could just leave at any moment. And as much as I don't think it'll happen, you still have that variable of Lance Stroll, where if he just completely shits the bed, will they drop him, even if his dad still owns the team? So it is very interesting. I don't really see anyone else in that seat. There is, I think, Stoffel Van Dorn is potentially a background driver for Aston Martin as well. I've got his name here, so I must have read that somewhere. I think he's a very outside call for Aston Martin. But
yeah, there's still something there. He could similar vibes to De Vries almost. Of course, he got a shot in F1 already, but he still went through a similar outside path of redemption per se.
True.
So it's not in the realms of impossibility.
Yeah, it's true. But for me, it's definitely between the Stroll, Alonso, Drogovic. And I think a lot of it. I still think Lance will hold his seat as long as he keeps doing enough. I think what he's doing currently is enough, as much as he still makes silly mistakes every so often. I think he does enough to hold that seat, so I think he'll hold it for 24 as well. Alonso, I think he'll stay there for the second year as well. I think I don't trust what Alonso says at all about this team. It's just a lot of talk, and it's a classic Fernando Alonso talk.
It's his way to burn bridges with the team he's gone to, which he does every time.
Yeah,
it comes back to them 10 years later.
Yes, yeah. So, at the same time, I still don't think I could see him just 1 year at Aston Martin, because I think if they're on this sort of 5-year plan, and Alonso seems to think in, whether or not it's, him over-exaggerating or not, their 5-year plan ends, I think, at the end of 24 or 25. So he's going to want to see it probably close to the end to see where they're at before deciding whether or not he wants to move on. So, I've got Stroll and Alonso there as well. I think Drogovic, I think there's a very good chance he could come in for Alonso should he decide to leave. I think he should keep very heavy ties with that team, because I think that'll happen in the next couple of years, I would think. So I think he's as long as he keeps, showing that he's worthwhile to the team, I think he could come into that team at some point. And I think unless someone else, comes out of the gate this year and shows are actually way better than Drogovic, and Aston Martin jump on him. But
yeah,
I think Drogovic could bide his time at Aston Martin and definitely find a seat. Although we said that about Piastri with Alpine, about biding time, and Alonso, and look what happened there. So
look what happened.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen again.
Yeah, it could. But Stroll, Alonso is who I've got. How about yourself?
Yes, so Aston is hard because I feel like the last few years with this team, what we've always said about Stroll is that if the team suddenly shines, and they're in this case which you had very similar to what we had with Ricciardo, where the team was really let down because of one driver and it mattered, that's when Stroll's seat gets more shaky, because although, of course, his dad does run the team, if they lose 2 constructors' positions very clearly because of him, then you start to go bigger picture and to say, look, this is your investment. What the hell are we doing here? And I don't know him personally, but you get the kind of vibe where if he's constantly talking up the team and saying this is what we do, we're very serious, you go, well, you say that, and yet you lost 2 free positions because you're keeping on a crap driver, even if he's your son, right? So it really does tie into saying we've had a few years now where it feels like Aston could jump out of the gates and smash out and be, only a bit behind the top 3, and yet they don't do that at all. Like, they do okay or they recover, but it's not that massive jump to beat that McLaren Alpine territory as they've sometimes been hyping up. If they do that, I feel like there's no reason that Alonso won't be taking advantage of that and absolutely killing it. And then I don't think Stroll would be doing that, and I think that's where the weakness would shine. So it's really a matter whether we think this is the year or it's a year too early. And I've thought it was a year for a few years, but it's never. So now I'm just like, well, God, so this is hard. I think Alonso's fine. I think he always sees things through for 2 years. I think 1 year it's unlikely for him, as bad as it goes, for him to throw it in. He seems to commit to things now. We've seen at least for that second year before he then starts halfway through the year going, right, that's it, I'm out of here because this is not working. Yep. So I think the ability for them to jump up is very likely in the next 2 years. I don't know. It's hard to say which one. Again, it's a matter of saying, well, if Stroll's out, who do they replace him with? Do you throw someone like a Ricciardo back in the ring to jump up? Do you throw in someone like a Mick who had strong ties with Seb, who vouched for him and has that kind of Mercedes association? If De Vries kills it, do they maybe pick him up and say, hey, we've got a future with you here? As you say with Drugovich, I feel like they've got him just because they want to build their own brand now. So rather than just pulling the Mercedes reserve drivers, they're kind of pulling to say, look, we've got someone to help out in the background as our guy, which they've never really had before. So I feel like that's more why they've got him rather than for a guy in the future. There's even an argument to say, if Stroll's so bad, do they still hold on to the Mercedes ties and pull in someone like a Vesti and say, look, Mercedes, you haven't got anyone coming up. We'll pull in Vesti for a year or two for us before we figure someone out, and then you can have him and see if he's capable to replace more likely a Lewis for you, right? So that's where I got, and I never really made a decision on it because I'm still looking at it going, I don't. It's really hard. So I think it's more likely year 2 is when they're going to excel. So I think I just have to say, because I already threw my dart in the hole with AlphaTauri spot. So I'm not going to throw a second dart. I've only got one random dart to throw this year, I'm going to say. So I will just say that they're going to stick the same, even though it's boring. Yeah. But if he does do poor, I think it would be... I'm just going to say it would be Vesti that would replace him. I think that's the interesting pick I would go with. So
interesting, yeah.
So it's like as a side thing. So I don't know if that's a question you could even answer if I posed to you to say who would replace him. If that's something you can figure out on the spot.
Man, I have no idea. I hadn't even considered that because I think you hold more weight to Aston Martin jumping up at some point than I do. I haven't seen enough to see it happening. There's not enough evidence for me to see it happening, which is why I think if the team sort of stays at, even if they improve a little bit, if they sort of stay at this status quo-y level, Lance will always do enough. As I say,
he gets a bit of grace because if he doesn't jump, if he doesn't hit that limit, that's okay because it doesn't matter in the big picture and they're still building. It's not at that point, which we've seen like for McLaren where it really did matter for them to have 2 performing drivers. They're not. I think we both agree that's what it all revolves around, and whether you think that's in the near future or not. So.
And who they would replace Stroll with, I couldn't answer.
That's the other thing. Do they even have someone that could do a better job? And that's I think they would need to roll the dice a bit on someone from F2 over someone like Drugovich or any of those drivers on the side now. But it's a curious one. I think that's if something does happen there, that could be one of the main talking points. I think most likely other than any other movements. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
All right.
All good. So we'll move on. My notes get a bit more shallow for the remaining teams. I'll give a bit of a spoiler, so maybe I'll be leaning on maybe you for a spicy take. But there could be one.
You might be leaning for a while there, buddy.
There's maybe one or two I'm hoping. Anyway, first of those is Haas. Interesting predicament where they seem to start off and they got 2 kind of solid older drivers in, then they pulled some newer guys in, they realized this isn't working, so they brought some older drivers in again. And it's whether you think they're going to stick with their pairing for another year, or whether you think this is a stopgap for someone else. again, I think a similar problem in that if either of them drop, who is coming in? Is Grosjean coming back? Are you bringing back like a Gutierrez or something?
Grosjean
like
doesn't even want to come back. He's talking.
Yes,
about
he's
it.
loving
Like,
it. He's loving it. As much as Magnussen also liked what he did, I feel like he didn't really have the perfect kind of environment to prove himself. While Grosjean had more than enough, I think, with his career and the teams he was with. So anyway, yes, I'm not picking Grosjean. That's for sure. That's how I'll say it.
Damn.
Now. So I've gone with the same drivers. I mainly say that because in terms of Hulk, I mean, there's part of my fanboyism showing that I think he'll do well enough alongside Magnussen. And I feel like if they wanted to gamble on someone new and Hulk isn't just a 1 year stopgap, they would have just gone with that gamble. Someone
straight away.
I can't even say some junior or someone left field, right? So I think I've got my money on both of them for at least the next years until Haas kind of solidify themselves and confirm that they're not just going to fall to the back again. I think it could, again, heavily rely on how well the Ferrari juniors do. There's an argument to say that someone could come in. So if one of them does smash it out of the park, then they could say, hey, Hulk, I think it's more likely than Magnussen, Hulk, you're really dropping the ball here. We're going to, bring someone in. I've heard a lot of talk of people saying that even though Magnussen did well, they feel like Mick wasn't a good teammate to push him. So he didn't really prove himself that much, which is an interesting take. But if that's the general vibe, then look, there's experts that are more knowledgeable than I am. So if they think Magnussen needs to prove himself as well against Hulk, then again, there's an argument to say maybe he doesn't prove himself, and then who replaces him. So it's all about if you think those drivers will be good enough, and if Haas would gamble on a Ferrari junior is how I see it. I don't think they will, but what's your take on the situation?
Yeah, pretty much echo the same things. I think 2 years, we've talked about Haas enough where they're sort of looking to rebuild. The reason why they've gone back to Hülkenberg is because they want these two solid drivers to, experienced drivers to develop this car and make sure it's the best it can be.
And just to firm up their baseline. They've made this jump now. They've done that before. They don't want to fall back. They're saying, let's just solidify it so we're not going to fall back. And then we can move on a bit and move up the field with some more spicy changes.
Definitely, yeah. So I think 2 years of that is very much... I think it's a necessity for them. I think if they, again, like you say, if they were just going to go the 1 year, then why not just gamble on someone, or keep Mick for another year or gamble on someone else.
Exactly, yes.
But they didn't do that. They obviously went the Hülkenberg route, which means they're looking for this for sort of a short to medium term, stopgap.
Yes.
Before assessing where their team is and where they need to go, and whether or not someone, like you said, I think it very reliant on where F2 ends up this year. The Ferrari juniors, I think, are a possibility for the future, particularly because I think the two Ferrari seats are way more set in stone than the Haas seats. And even to that point, Ferrari still longer term, as we say, needs to think about things, and they've still got that relationship there with Haas. So it's a bit of scratch each other's back thing, right? Yeah, exactly. So the only other drivers I had in there were the Fittipaldi and Giovinazzi. I think they're both like reserve test background drivers.
Yes.
Fittipaldi, they're never going to give him a seat. I don't know why he keeps signing on with them to keep doing it.
There'd be some
probably, I don't
commercial relationship reason why.
Must be, yeah. And then Giovinazzi, I don't know that I see him coming back to Formula 1.
Well, he kind of solidified his future in America, didn't he?
Yeah.
When he had a bit of a spin, so that kind of went, that's not good.
Didn't help, yeah. So, I think echoing your thoughts, I think 2 years with Magnussen, Hülkenberg, and if someone was to go, I think Hülkenberg would probably be the one to go. I think Magnussen did. It is an interesting conversation about how he didn't really have a good teammate to go up against with Mick, but you also have to remember that Magnussen came in literally last second and immediately beat Mick. Like, straight away, he was faster
and
than
immediately
Mick.
put in some very good performances.
Yes.
Saying it's not that he's poor.
Yeah.
I think the conversation is interesting, saying people think he has even more potential. He needs a good teammate to really show
Push
that.
him,
and if Haas are a team that want to jump up, similar to that story with Aston Martin, where it could be a case where two solid drivers that are really pushing each other could mean the difference of potentially two constructors' positions, which is huge.
Definitely. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on, Williams, of course, have a pretty solid driver now in Albon. There's a case to say, where is he going? there's another team we haven't touched on yet he's associated with, which, I mean, we could talk about when we get there. And a relative unknown in the American Logan Sargent. So this is another one where, yes, it's likely, like, you could put your money on something happening, but I haven't got the info to say what that something is, as it will just, like, you could pick from just a pool of any storyline. You go, yeah, that actually makes sense for someone. Again, let's go back to Vesti, right? He could smash it out and they go, Sergeant, you did dog crap, get in there. Albin's leaving, Vesti, there you go. We got that Mercedes tie. But I'm not, I don't have my money on that at all. I have my money that the two are staying the same. And even, as I say, when I try to build another story, it's just a load of faff that falls apart. So, but judging by your body language, I think we're aligned on this case.
This one was the only team where I didn't have in brackets another driver that I could potentially fit in there. The only team that I couldn't think of one that was reasonable. Yes, Williams was the only team. So yeah, I've got Albon Sargent for another year as well. That was easy. Because, yeah, like I said, every time I try to think of someone, I'm like, well, I would see them either going to another team, or if I just can't fathom it in my brain.
Or they would have been in the seat already instead of Sargent. They wouldn't have picked Sargent.
Exactly.
Kind of like a pick where they're like, we don't really have anything else, let's go with him. They would have put a Nissani in the car or something like that, which they didn't. So not changing there. Yeah. So, next team I've got, I'll swap these two actually. So I'll go next with Alpine.
Okay.
A team that is now the French powerhouse. A team that is interesting. I've seen some people touting that they'll actually close that gap to the top three. Something they don't think the general population thinks is more likely than McLaren doing it, which I think is quite an interesting storyline. Now they've obviously made their case. They want Ocon for the longer term. Whether that was kind of forced through what's happened recently, but you still feel like Ocon and Piastri was going to be their future powerhouse. They've instead had to go with Ocon and Gasly, which I don't think is that bad a result to get.
Yeah.
I think as long as the car is proving well and performing well, they'll get along well. If that car is doing crap, you could see them then using that as an excuse to butt heads and such. But
sure.
You feel like they wouldn't have made this signing if they sat back and said, right, look, here's the case. We're going to offer you a great car, great package. Get the job done. Don't be assholes, and we're going to prosper together, right? So I've gone that they're going to stay the same. Same case of saying if they would kick someone out, then why wouldn't they have just done that last year? Partly because what they wanted to do last year they couldn't do, but then what's changing this year from that case? Nothing. Like, does Piastri do such a crap job? They go, hey, we'll take him off your hands because he's doing crap for you. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, what are you talking about? There'll be a laughing stock if that actually happens. So, I've gone the same too. Have you got any thoughts as to something else they could do? Or
so the only difference I find with Alpine is that they do have someone. They do have junior drivers in like an Ollie Caldwell and Victor Martins.
Yep.
And
Jack Doohan as well,
and
right?
Jack Doohan. I do have Doohan here as well. I don't know that he'll get the seat. I don't think.
No, the others seem to be. He seems decent, but Alpine actually have, which is ironic. They've got a history now of actually having some pretty good juniors. So they're there's a case for a few others over Doohan.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of, as we talked about earlier, Victor Martins. There's a lot of hype around him, and now that he's coming into F2. If he does smash it out of the park, then there's a case to be made for him possibly coming into the team. But yeah, I think that's more futuristically, like past 2024. I think they're building pretty well. Let's just
do our 2025 predictions.
Yeah,
now.
I know, right? Yeah,
do it early. We might as well just do that. Yeah. We'll label this 24 and 25. We've basically done it anyway.
Pretty much, yeah. We'll just reference this next year. Yeah, I've got Ocon Gasly as well. I think that Gasly's not going to be there for 1 year unless, again, he completely shits the bed. He's not going to be dropped.
He's been looking for something to jump to for ages. He's not coming here as a stopgap. Because what is it a stopgap to? Him to go back to Red Bull? Look, if this is a sign that he's not going back to Red Bull, I don't know what is. So.
Yeah, so, and Ocon's obviously, as you say, he's been built up to lead that team. So, I think, the interesting story is whether or not these two will get along. I think it'll be, at least for the first year, it'll be amicable enough, regardless of what happens. I think it has to be, because if it's not, then they're going to have some real problems. So I think it kind of has to be amicable between the two of them. So they'll get a second year, I reckon. Yeah, that's all I have to say. There's not much else there. But
the last team we've got here is the one and only number one, the RBR Red Bull Racing. Talking points, I guess, extend from last year. I guess without... Well, you're the more likely to have talking points here. There's a bit more bias coming in from my side yet again. So, it's an extension of the talking points last year who would replace him, but most guesses people have, I feel like, have now sorted themselves out and have to be undone.
yeah.
I still think that even though they gave Perez his extension and he did perform well at parts of last year, again, if the fight is even closer and if he does significantly drop the ball and costs Red Bull another, position in constructors or such like that, then you'd say, well, we've got to replace him. But I feel like you go back to the board and say, but who do you replace him with? Like, we're talking about the fact that AlphaTauri's kind of boy that they've been brewing is on the doors out, and their new force coming in terms of De Vries. Like, if he has a stellar year and they come in and replace him, then that's win-win for everybody. But that's if you're putting your money there, then I think that's just because you got no other good storylines to go with. Then you start. Well, it's like if he really drops the ball, do you pull in a junior there straight away? Do you poach from someone else? Do you
throw Ricciardo in there?
Yeah, so I think that's the other one is people saying, well, do you actually throw Ricciardo in there? Which I think in a what do you call it? I don't know what word to use. In a dreamy world, let's say, then sure, then that's like a nice thought. But then he did just have two bloody awful years at McLaren, and they're not. I feel like they want to go with something solid if they're really in this intense fight for the next few years.
Realistically, I can't see it happening.
Yes, but then if Perez is crap, then what do they do? That's still another case where you go, well, they're kind of stuck with him, and I kind of hope that he does continue to do well and shine as he did some of last year. I mean, again, he's been talking about saying, hey, they're changing the car a bit to make it more what I like, but we've heard this before, so it's a case of like, well, we just got to see how it plays out. But this is a case where something could happen, and it's similar to the Stroll thing. You say, but then what do they do? Because they're a little bit ham-fisted here. They put all their cards in on not a certain quantity. So again, if I haven't said it clearly enough, I'm going with the same. Partially because of bias, so maybe it's the easier route rather than trying to actually come up with a good narrative here. But your thoughts? I want to know your thoughts. I've talked enough.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. Because, like you say, if someone, I mean, I say someone, Max is going to hold that seat. If Perez does, if Perez does end up sort of dropping back and costing them a point, like who do they throw in? I still can't see Ricciardo going in. As much as I love Ricciardo, come on, dog.
He's there for the PR value, 100%.
Yeah,
like, it's great that he's there, but yeah, he's had two awful stinking years. So.
It's not good, yeah. And then you can't really see like a Lawson or Maloney going straight to Red Bull. That's just not going to happen. And then the only other talking point is De Vries, but like he would have to fucking more or less win the championship to be given that seat. So that's not going to happen. So who do they go? They would have to do what they did with Perez and grab probably from another team. But who do they take? Do they get a Norris if Norris is unhappy with McLaren and Norris wants to go up against Verstappen at Red Bull? Do they try and go that way? I don't think it's gonna happen. Like, I just see it more likely that Perez will again. He'll hold his own. I think he's shown enough currently to where he knows how to win races when they fall away from Max, or when the car does, or the track suits him, or the car is set up well enough for him. He knows how to win those, and I think that's at the moment that's all Red Bull need. When that starts to be not enough is when I guess those questions come in. But I have no evidence to suggest currently.
You feel like he's still like he's got we know he has an extension, but in F1 terms, that means jack crap.
I've stopped looking into who has what contract now because I realize it doesn't matter.
This guy has this contract and that, and they're just like,
Doesn't
that
matter.
of course means nothing.
I've got
because
no
you can buy
idea.
people out with a handshake between drivers.
Exactly.
So I feel like he did enough to earn himself another year, or even let's say half a year, if you want to be pessimistic in that matter, which is fair enough. But as you say, if he doesn't meet those re-sign clauses for the following year, what do they do? It's a case of all the top teams where they kind of don't have anyone in the wings if someone does drop off, but you feel like Red Bull, the most likely of the top 3 teams to have a driver that may drop off. The second closest really is Sainz, and I feel like he's going to be a bit more likely to perform well enough in that situation if it's close to the top compared to Perez. So it's interesting. Red Bull have got a bit of a head scratch, and they've just got to try and make a compromise between the drivers. Of course, we saw a bit of that drama last year, which could develop further. You don't know.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
I think
for a year that maybe has less talking points than last year, that one is interesting.
Yeah.
So,
I think Red Bull are just gonna have to like basically sit there and pray that they're just the same as last year. Like if they're just that. If they had the same year they had last year, or even sort of close enough to, Max wins the championship, Red Bull wins the constructors, then they don't have to think about it. They don't have to worry about it. They just be like, okay, cool. As long as the drivers are happy, we've won both championships.
They've got some
awesome.
time to assess their genius to get someone in
AlphaTauri
to them.
I think they're just kind of, hoping that's they don't really have to ask any of the questions that we've posed, because if they have to do that, then they're possibly in a world of hurt. But yeah, we'll see. We will see. But I think I only changed one driver in the entire grid, and that was Liam Lawson in for Yuki Tsunoda. That's it. Everything else is the same. I'm not apologizing, by the way. I want to pick the correct answers, so shut up. If you want to pick your bold predictions...
I don't know what you're apologizing for. I'm like, huh?
I'm not apologizing. I want to win.
Yes.
I want to get the most points.
As I say, when I tried to do a bit of research almost for some inspiration, some people were just like massively throwing the dice at something, which yes, it could happen in theory, but it's no more likely than 30 other storylines. So
exactly, yeah.
Something probably will happen because it's F1 and something always happens. Yep. But there's so little to go on right now, and it makes it's not like that's because the things are boring. It's just because there's been a lot of change into this year.
Yeah.
That has to play out first.
Yeah.
So if we get to half of the year and then we're predicting the predictions, I think that gets a lot more interesting. But we're not at that point yet. We haven't seen anything.
No,
so it's like you've just got to go with the most likely outcome, which is, I guess, trust that all the teams have made their decisions that correctly for the next few years, and they're only going to pull the plug if something really disaster happens, which is really hard to predict. So
it definitely, like, as much as last year's was super interesting and super fun to watch unfold, it does have that knock-on effect for future years, where because everything has changed so much, it's just not going to change for future years.
Yep.
Ideally, so. But we've been proven wrong before, so. Same with the season predictions. We'd love to be proven wrong or proven. Driver predictions less so. Like, if I want every driver to perform that's on the grid, like this is. There's very few drivers on this grid at the moment that I just don't really like or don't think really belong there. So I do want them all to sort of perform this year. I think it'll be a real intriguing year to see, the matchups between teammates to really gauge where everyone's at.
Yep.
Very, very interesting to watch. But and yeah, like you said, watching F2 is, I think that's going to have to be a must to see where those drivers stack up, because that's going to be playing a big role for 2024 and onwards as well. Yep. So, but yeah,
and we'll be fortunate enough to watch F2 in person as well.
Ooh.
So that's very exciting.
Spoiler.
Spoiler. Is this not public knowledge?
That'd be good.
Oh, good. So anyway, if you've got any outside predictions, do let us know, because as I say, there's not a lot of people talking yet. I imagine most content creators are running into the same issue we are, where they want to make a spicy video, but it's really hard to be spicy. So yeah, if you've got anything bold, throw it in the comments, let us know, or reach out to us on Twitter at Final Sector. But otherwise, that will do us here for now. So do subscribe and keep in touch with us. But otherwise, that'll do us for today, guys. We'll see you in the next video.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.